long before the rise of cities or kings. When the earth still belonged more to beast than to men, survival was a daily gamble between hunter and hunted. In the vast wilderness of the Stone Age, every step meant risk, every shadow held a secret, and sometimes the prey turned into the predator. This is not just the story of early humans chasing life through the wild. It's the haunting tale of the hunt that hunted back life and death in the Stone Age. In the vast, untamed world of the Stone Age, the line between predator and prey was a delicate thread, easily broken by hunger, fear, or chance. Early humans existed in a realm where survival was not a right but a fleeting victory, where the pursuit of food meant stepping into the jaws of danger. Every hunt was a gamble against nature itself, an ancient wager of muscle, instinct, and cunning. The hunter's triumph could turn to tragedy in an instant, and the wilderness knew no mercy for those who made a single mistake. This was a time when every rustle of leaves carried a warning, and every drop of blood spilled, whether animal or human, fed the unending cycle of life and death. To understand the fragile balance between predator and prey in prehistoric survival, one must imagine a world where humans were not at the top of the food chain. They were merely one species among many, competing for the same scarce resources. Giant cats, saber-toothed predators, cave bears, and packs of wolves ruled the landscape with unmatched ferocity. For early humans, a simple hunt for meat or hide meant intruding into territories already claimed by creatures faster, stronger, and more efficient at killing. Their greatest tools were not claws or fangs, but an evolving intelligence, a growing awareness of patterns, sounds, and movement that allowed them to survive where brute strength alone would fail. Each day began with uncertainty. The hunters would track herds of wild beasts across plains, reading the earth like a map. The bent grass, the soft imprint of hooves, the faint scent of dung carried by the wind. But the same signs that revealed their prey could also betray their presence to lurking predators. The rhythm of survival was a dance of awareness, an unspoken dialogue between the hunter and the hunted. If they moved too slowly, the herd would vanish. Too recklessly, and something far more dangerous might find them first. This balance demanded more than courage. It required respect for the wild, a recognition that they were never alone, never in full control. Fire became one of their first shields in this eternal contest. It offered warmth, protection, and a sense of dominance over the night, yet even fire had its limits. A flickering flame could hold back a stalking predator for a while, but once it dimmed, the darkness reclaimed its throne. Around the campfires, humans learned not only to cook meat, but to tell stories. Tales of narrow escapes, of hunts gone wrong, of companions lost to the shadows. These stories were not just entertainment, they were survival lessons passed from one generation to the next, shaping instincts that would one day define civilization itself. Weapons carved from stone gave early humans a small but crucial edge. Spears, axes, and sharpened blades transformed the hunt from a desperate chase into a calculated risk. Yet, the more they hunted, the more they were hunted in return. The scent of blood would draw scavengers from miles away, hyenas, jackals, vultures circling in the sky. A single kill could turn into a battlefield, where victory was measured not by who struck first, but by who managed to leave alive. This fragile equilibrium meant that every meal came with a price, every success balanced on the edge of danger. Even the terrain conspired against them. Dense forests concealed ambushes, open plains left them exposed, and frozen tundras drained their strength with each breath. Nature tested them endlessly, forcing adaptation through hardship. They learned to work together, to move silently, to anticipate danger before it struck. Their eyes grew sharper, their minds quicker, their sense of cooperation deeper. The understanding that survival depended not only on strength, but on awareness was perhaps humanity's first true wisdom. The balance between predator and prey was not only physical but psychological. Fear was both a curse and a gift. It sharpened the senses, quickened the pulse, and made the mind alert to the slightest change in the environment. Fear taught them humility, for even the greatest hunter could fall prey in a single moment of arrogance. The world around them was a living, breathing entity, filled with sounds, scents, and signs that spoke a language older than words. To survive, early humans had to listen. Over generations, this constant struggle forged an unspoken law between species: nothing kills without risk. nothing survives without loss. A lion that missed its prey would starve, a human that misjudged its aim would bleed. There was no cruelty in this cycle, only necessity. The hunter and the hunted existed in a relationship of mutual dependence, each shaping the other's evolution. Predators grew sharper, faster, more cunning. Humans grew more strategic, more observant, more united. The balance was delicate, yet it sustained the pulse of the world for thousands of years. In this fragile balance, life was both sacred and expendable. Each creature played its part in a vast, unending story written across the landscapes of stone and bone. The first humans learned to read that story not with words, but with instinct, with the rhythm of footsteps, the crack of a twig, the movement of birds startled into flight. They began to understand that the hunt was not merely an act of survival. It was a dialogue with nature itself, a test of awareness, humility, and respect. The world did not belong to them, they belonged to the world, bound by the same rules that governed every living thing. Fear, instinct, and cunning were not just emotions or traits in the Stone Age. They were the invisible tools that shaped the destiny of early humans. In a world where nature's rules were written in blood and survival depended on awareness, these three forces worked together to define who lived long enough to see another sunrise. The humans of this age were neither the strongest nor the fastest creatures around, yet they endured and adapted. What separated them from the countless beasts that shared their world was not physical power, but the evolving mind, sharpened by fear, guided by instinct, and refined through cunning. Fear was their first teacher. It was not the paralyzing fear of imagination, but the instinctive, primal awareness that whispered from deep within. The tightening in the chest when a predator's shadow passed nearby. The stillness when the forest grew silent. The understanding that unseen eyes might be watching. Fear was information. It was life's way of saying, listen closely, danger is near. For the early human, fear was not an enemy. It was a companion, an early warning system that kept them alive in an environment where hesitation could mean death. The rustle of tall grass, the faint crack of a branch, the shift in wind direction, all became signs that the mind learned to interpret in seconds. Over time, this sensitivity to danger became part of human evolution itself, sharpening the senses and wiring the brain for survival. Instinct was the body's response to fear, a deep and ancient wisdom that existed long before words. It guided movement, reaction, and decision. It told the hunter when to strike and when to hide, when to approach a beast and when to retreat into silence. The instinct to protect, to nurture, to form groups and share warmth. These were not learned behaviors, but echoes of life's oldest code. In the heart of every hunt, when chaos erupted and the air filled with tension, instinct took over where reason faltered. A raised spear, a sudden dodge, a quick glance that saved a life, all born from instinct honed by generations of struggle. Cunning, however, was where humanity began to transcend instinct. Cunning was the awakening of thought. The realization that survival could be planned, that the future could be imagined and shaped. It was cunning that taught early humans to observe patterns, to watch how prey moved, to understand when predators slept or hunted. They began to set traps, to lure animals, to use the terrain to their advantage. They discovered that intelligence could turn weakness into strength. The first spark of cunning may have come from desperation, a moment when pure instinct was not enough and something deeper, more creative, had to emerge. It was the beginning of strategy, the birth of anticipation, the first steps toward what would one day be called reason. Through fear, instinct, and cunning, humans learned the art of cooperation. Alone, a person could not match the claws of a cat or the speed of a wolf, but together they could become a force of nature. Cunning allowed them to divide roles during a hunt, to communicate through gestures, sounds, or silent understanding. Fear drove them to seek the safety of the group, and instinct bonded them through shared experience. They began to trust one another, not because they were fearless, but because they were united by the same fears. Around the fire, they shared not just warmth but wisdom. Each hunt became a lesson, each failure a story, each scar a reminder of what the mind could overcome. Over generations, the combination of these forces began to reshape the human body and brain. The constant vigilance demanded by fear expanded their perception. The necessity of reacting through instinct refined their reflexes. The growing use of cunning strengthened their intelligence. They began to see themselves differently, not merely as part of nature, but as participants in its grand design. This new self-awareness did not make them immune to fear, rather, it gave fear purpose. The same emotion that once froze them in terror became a source of insight. They learned to use fear as fuel, to anticipate it, to channel it into focus and creativity. In this way, cunning became more than survival, it became adaptation. The human mind learned to see patterns not just in movement, but in time. They began to understand seasons, migrations, the rhythm of nature itself. From fear of hunger came the idea of storing food. From fear of darkness came the discovery of firelight. From fear of death came the first sparks of belief and ritual. The same instincts that once drove them to flee from predators now led them to imagine gods, spirits, and forces greater than themselves. Fear evolved into reverence, instinct evolved into intuition, cunning evolved into foresight. These three forces shaped every decision, every moment of awareness. When a group ventured into new territory, it was fear that made them cautious, instinct that guided their movements, and cunning that planned their escape. When they encountered other tribes, it was fear that warned of danger, instinct that measured trust, and cunning that formed alliances or deceit. They learned that power did not come from domination alone, but from understanding, the ability to think like both predator and prey. The legacy of these forces did not fade with time, it remained embedded in the human mind. Even in moments of calm, the ancient pulse of survival lingered beneath the surface. The quickening heartbeat in the dark, the hesitation before danger, the thrill of pursuit, all remnants of a past where life balanced on a knife's edge. Fear, instinct, and cunning were not just responses to danger. They were the foundations upon which humanity's intelligence was built, the silent architects of consciousness itself, shaping every thought, every movement, and every choice in the endless dance between life and death. In the raw and uncertain world of the Stone Age, survival was never guaranteed, and the first humans began to realize a truth that would echo through time. It was not always the strongest who survived, but the most aware, the most adaptable, the most willing to change. Strength alone could crush bone or wield a weapon, but it could not predict the storm, sense an ambush, or navigate the unseen logic of the wilderness. Those who thrived were not the ones with the hardest muscles or the sharpest tools, but those who learned to listen to the earth, to read the language of the wind, and to move with the rhythm of life rather than against it. The Stone Age was not merely an era of physical endurance. It was the birth of intelligence as a form of survival. Early humans watched the world with a kind of sacred attention. They saw how the smallest creatures survived where giants fell, how patience could defeat speed, and how silence could protect more than shouting ever could. A single spark of understanding began to grow in their minds, the recognition that survival depended less on dominance and more on awareness. They started to notice that the animals they hunted often escaped not by fighting, but by knowing the land better, by sensing danger before it struck. This quiet observation became humanity's first lesson in humility, teaching them that brute force was only one kind of power, and not always the most reliable. Adaptation became their true weapon. When the environment shifted, when prey migrated, when the cold grew unbearable, they changed with it. They crafted new tools, altered their hunting methods, sought new shelters, and learned to endure. Where other species perished, humans bent but did not break. Their survival was not an act of defiance against nature, but a deep conversation with it. They began to understand patterns. The changing light, the migration of herds, the arrival of seasons, the ability to see beyond the present moment, to anticipate what would come next, was what set them apart. It was not strength, but foresight that carried them forward. This awakening also altered how they perceived one another. The tribe, once a loose gathering for safety, became a living organism of shared intelligence. Each person's weakness found balance in another's strength. The elderly, though no longer physically powerful, held the wisdom of the land. The young, full of energy, carried the courage to explore beyond familiar boundaries. Cooperation became more valuable than individual might. They learned that survival was a collective act, and that even the smallest contribution could mean the difference between life and extinction. In the silence of night, as fires flickered and shadows danced, they discovered that unity itself was a form of strength, one that no beast could match. The understanding that awareness could outlast strength also reshaped their relationship with death. When hunters fell, when the prey turned the chase, when life ended suddenly, it forced them to confront the fragility of existence. They began to see death not only as an enemy, but as a teacher, a reminder that every action, every decision, carried weight. This awareness deepened their perception of time. They no longer lived only in the present, they remembered the past and imagined the future. Through this imagination, they began to create meaning, finding purpose in survival rather than mere endurance. It was in these moments that humanity first began to dream, not as escape, but as preparation, as a rehearsal for what life demanded of them. Over time, this realization became ingrained in the human spirit. The strongest among them might fall to hunger, disease, or the jaws of predators, but the ones who observed, learned, and adapted passed their knowledge onward. It was an inheritance more valuable than any physical trait, the inheritance of awareness. They began to recognize that intelligence was not separate from nature, but an extension of it. The same instincts that guided the wolf and the eagle now evolved in humans into reflection and strategy. This was the first glimpse of consciousness as survival, the birth of an intelligence rooted in the understanding that the world could not be conquered by might alone, only navigated through harmony. In the quiet aftermath of hunts, when the adrenaline faded and the forest settled, early humans must have felt this awareness stirring within them. They would look at the animal they had taken down and understand the exchange. Life for life, hunger for death. There was reverence in this understanding, a silent acknowledgement that they were part of something larger, something cyclical and eternal. This sense of connection taught them restraint. To overhunt meant to starve later, to ignore the balance meant to invite ruin. The awareness that survival was fragile began to shape the first moral codes, the earliest whispers of what would one day become empathy and ethics. As generations passed, these insights turned into instincts of their own. The human brain, ever adapting, began to favor imagination over impulse, cooperation over competition, observation over aggression. Even in moments of danger, the mind could pause and think, could weigh choices and foresee outcomes. This ability, to imagine what might happen before it did, became the most powerful survival tool of all. It was the beginning of planning, of creativity, of innovation. The spear, the fire, the shelter, the first painting on a cave wall, all came from that same awareness that survival was not about overpowering the world, but understanding it. And so, through trial and terror, through fear and hunger, humanity learned its most profound lesson, that life endures not through strength, but through wisdom, not through dominance, but through awareness. The first humans, standing between life and extinction, began to awaken to themselves, realizing that survival belonged to those who could see the invisible threads that connected everything around them. The prey, the predator, the earth, the sky, and their own beating hearts.